Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. I'm going to read a quick bio about our performer and then we'll get started. Sampson is a professional spoken word artist from South Florida and has toured over 1,000 colleges all over the country since 2006. He's been seen on HBO Deaf Poetry Jam, TED Talks, Button Poetry, NPR's Tiny Desk Contest, and So Far Sounds. He has worked with companies like Disney, To Write Love on Her Arms, and most recently, Nokia Mobile. He has broken college performing records for the Most Book Poetry Act, garnering him with the awards of APCA College Performer of the Year and thrice the APCA Spoken Word Artist of the Year, Sampson.
So think back to when you were a child and try to remember what you wanted to be when you grew up. Think about it for a second while I tell you about mine. You know what I wanted to be? I wanted to be a heart surgeon / architect / painter / ninja. Like, that's a thing, right? Like, think about it. I would design and build a hospital where I work, saving lives by day while assassinating them by night. Only the bad guys, obviously. Okay, fine, mostly. Then use the blood of those I've slain to paint beautiful landscapes on my porch every Sunday. Okay, that's disturbing, but it's totally doable. And I kept believing that until Maya, a second grader, punched me in my third grade stomach, and I let out such a loud scream I realized I would make the most horrible ninja ever, but that's okay, because I could still be a heart surgeon / architect / painter. And I kept believing that until Mrs. Mercutio, my high school counselor, told me my grades were as low as my parents' income, so I better think of something else besides med school. To this day, I wonder if she's still there, flicking off the light switch inside our children to keep them from being brilliant, but that's okay, because I could still be an architect / painter. And I kept believing that until my father, who's an architect, said it's really hard to find a job as an architect. Wait, no. Until they said artists will always starve. Wait, no. Until be realistic, until find stability, until I had no slashes left to keep tabs of all of my dreams. As children, we transformed blankets into tents and explored the safaris of our bedrooms by flashlight. We wore goggles and snorkels in the bathtub, believing this was an ocean filled with wonders and sea creatures we will discover when we dive. We tied towels around our necks and flew off the coffee table, pointing to the spot where we needed to land to break our record. We drew pictures of ourselves, the astronauts / teachers, the ballet dancers / rock stars. I kept mine at the bottom of my drawer for safekeeping, only to find them last week, hidden beneath mortgage papers and credit card statements and the work badge I used to enter the building of a job I never wanted. How much further was I willing to bury who I was meant to become just to live a life that's steady? How long have I muffled the voices of those drawings when they try to tell me steady is just the word we like to use anytime someone asks, how's your life? And we're too ashamed to give the actual answer. In 2006, my doctor looked me in the eyes and told me I had testicular cancer, to which I replied, yay, sounds like a ball. He didn't laugh. Instead, he says, you understand that after we remove one testicle, you'll only have one testicle left. And I said, okay, well then I'll just change my name to One Hung Lo, because I'm Asian. Still nothing. Instead, he says, you might not be able to have children after this. You might want to consider having your sperm frozen before the surgery. And I said, great. I will never look at frozen yogurt the same way ever again. You didn't think any of my jokes were funny, but how could you not find them funny? You're talking about me, the guy who once had dreams of doing ambitious things and is now teaching telemarketing to students and retired bankers, the guy who was taught that being a man meant being fully equipped, and now you want to come snip and separate the Wonder Twins, the guy who will later tell his friends and then respond by texting him a picture of a wonton saying, hey, don't worry, we found you a replacement, the guy who's already so skinny that those automatic doors at the grocery store can't detect me, and I have to wave my arms and jump like a madman until it opens, and now you're saying I may have to go through chemo, which will make me skinnier than I already am. Damn, how is that not hilarious? Yeah, you might not find that funny, but I can guarantee you that whoever's piloting my fate decided to raid the minibar, lock the cockpit doors, and is hysterically pissing their pants by now. Have you ever wondered why maniacal laughter is never included in the stages of grief? Maybe because it doesn't last that long. Maybe it's just a parentheses, nestled between denial and anger, hold the grin between my clenched teeth long enough to get the hell out of his office so I can cry on the shoulders of my car seat. How did I get here? I've never been one to go rogue and write my life past the margins. I once made billboards of my milestones and staggered them along my road to success. And now I'm wondering at what point did I lose the concrete beneath my steps? Maybe it's when my parents took that first flying exit out of their marriage. Maybe it's when I took that detour out of college, thinking there had to be a faster way, only to find myself going in circles until the student loan light started blinking. Maybe I got tired of running on empty. Maybe it's why I took that desk job that promised me my own corner office. Maybe I couldn't tell if it was the tie or the slow death strangling my neck, working long hours, paying for a degree I never got. Maybe that's what led to this. Laying on the hospital bed, now eyes towards the God I was told was a God of promise, asking, are you laughing? Do you not see this? The heavy-handed nurse pushing the needle in and out of my skin, failing to find a vein for the IV. The machines beeping like an SOS distress signal, like maybe this is it for me. The rock bottom ending to a life spent falling. How funny that the last words I'll ever hear is a doctor saying he'll do his best to make the scar as minimal as possible, as if my prayers resided on that. I don't remember anything after. I just remember the fade to black. But I do remember this. Just before the darkness engulfed me like a confession booth, just before the anesthesia grabbed me by the veins to drag me to my sleep, I heard a voice say, don't you see? This is your out. Because how can you ask to be molded into the person you're meant to be and then question how it's being done now? And when I woke up, I found myself here, standing on the stage, performing a poem where I get to say, I'm now 13 years cancer-free. I got a sexy battle scar slash beneath my belly. Oh, and remember what they said about me not being able to have children? Well, I should also mention, I now have a son much more perfect than any poem that can ever come from me. My son, who hides fruit snacks in the crevices of the couch and eats them again 2 days later. My son, who has this weird thing about placing stickers over his nipples. My son, who gets to pick out a book for us to read before he goes to bed, and eventually figured out that the longer the book, the longer he gets to stay up. No, I will not read you the entire Twilight trilogy. Now, put that back in mommy's drawer before you ruin it. My son, all right, so quick story. My son is 6 years old, obviously potty trained, but he's not at that point yet where he can clean himself, right? And so the other day, this dude was on the toilet doing his business. And when he finished, I kid you not, this kid yells out, Alexa, I'm done. I'm like, no, dude, Alexa doesn't do that. My son, who manages to leave Legos on the floor in the exact same spot I'll be walking in the middle of the night. So when the top of those Antichrist toys meets the bottom of my holy foot, I have to hold my mouth to silence the screams, because if I wake him, he won't go back to sleep for the rest of my life. If you think I'm overreacting, let me ask you, have you ever stepped barefoot on Legos? Trust me, it hurts a lot more than having a testicle removed. But I still let him have them, because every time we put a new Lego set together, he immediately takes it apart and rearranges all the pieces. And when I tell him that's not how it looks in the picture, he replies by saying, it's okay, this way is better. Sometimes fate has a way of dismantling our lives to tell us it's okay, this way is better. May we all be rearranged and rebuilt like that. May the billboards of our plans be shredded by the wind. So I'll ask you again, think back to when you were a child. And the answer you gave when someone asked what you wanted to be when you grew up. Think of how quick those answers came, held together by slashes before the world tried tearing them apart. Yeah, we may no longer want what we wanted back then, but it doesn't mean our hearts are meant to settle for something we don't want now, because somewhere you're 6 years old, still filling in the blanks of all the things you've ever wanted to be. You, that could be firefighter slash veterinarian. You, that could be superhero slash fashion designer. You, that could be master chef slash PlayStation gold medalist. You, the wide-eyed wanderers with your gaze towards the horizon. You, with the impossible mountains to climb. Do it for the gram. Bring your slash back. Place them between everything that makes up who you are, whoever that might be. Claim the amazing you've become and drop all the which no longer fits you. Me, I am Asia Sampson, writer slash performer slash cancer survivor slash husband slash father slash professional napper. No, I never became an architect, but I found much more joy in building people up. No, I never became a heart surgeon, but I try to write poems that cut through the chest and get to what's broken. And no, I never became a ninja. Actually, that's not true. I'm totally a ninja. I'm like the most awesome ninja, fighting my best fight when the darkness comes. So tell the world to keep an eye out, because somewhere I'll be lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when I do, I promise you will never see me coming. What's going on, Kutztown? Thank you so much for having us and allowing me to come and do poetry for you, albeit virtually. I wish that we were in the state of a world right now where we can travel and, be there and perform poetry for you in person. But the world is changing. And so here we are, and I can't see your reactions. I can't see if you're laughing or crying or, responding to the poem, but I am just trusting that you are watching and having a good time there. I am Asia Sampson. Tonight I will be hosting this amazing event for your school. We have a couple of performers that are going to come out tonight. It's going to be great. I love being able to do shows where I'm not the only performer, right? Because then it's like I love to watch what other students are doing in other campuses. So tonight's going to be a fun night. Kick back, relax. We're all here and we're still all alive, and we have to be thankful for that, right? So don't stress out about what you have to do. I know being at home and watching shows virtually can be a bit difficult because you're like, oh, maybe I should go write some, pay some bills or do my paper or whatever. It's all good. Chill out for about an hour or so, and just be entertained and have nothing to do, right? Sometimes it's okay to just be there and have nothing to do but just self-care and listen to some poetry. So tonight I'm going to do some poems, and in between that I'm going to bring up some performers. But also what I'm going to do is throughout the night I'm going to spread out some haikus for you. Now, if you don't know what a haiku is, most of you should. Haiku is a Japanese poem made up of 3 lines. The first line has 5 syllables, followed by 7 syllables, followed by 5 syllables. So total 17 syllables. Now, in haikus, it's very hard to write them because you have to compact all these deep thoughts into just 3 lines of poetry. So I'm going to read some of my favorite haikus that I've written. You may not get them right away, right? Because they, 3 lines, trying to get deep. They might be too deep and you may not pick up on them right now, but then maybe later you might be laying there and then one of the haikus hits you and you're like, oh, wow, I just got it. That was pretty deep. Asia, thank you. So if you don't get them, don't worry. Okay, they're super duper deep. So number 1, turn up, on fleek, cash me outside. Stop texting me, mom, you're 65. Yeah, deep, super deep, super deep. Number 2, I've got 99 problems, but a testicle, I only have 1. Super deep, super deep. Number 3, just because I have small feet doesn't mean I have a small, let's get that one. All right, so I'm gonna do one more poem for y'all before I bring up our first performer. I'm gonna preface this poem for a sec. So a long time ago, I wrote a poem called 90s Love. 90s Love was then featured on Button Poetry, and it did really well on Button that I started getting phone calls about it, right? It was one of my favorite poems, and then I would go to colleges and perform this poem called 90s Love. But to be honest, a lot of people didn't get the reference. Well, a lot of people got the references then, but as I started touring more and more every year, I started noticing that every time I come back to a school, I've grown up to be a year older, but the audience has stayed the same age. So this generational gap started to grow really wide. And at some point, maybe a couple years ago, people were no longer able to understand some of the references that I used. Fortunately, about a couple years ago, also, I get a phone call from a company called Nokia Mobile. For all of you young guys, Nokia used to be the guys who made cell phones back then, before iPhones and Androids were a thing, right? Nokia was like this huge company. They had the best cell phones, unbreakable cell phones. And they called me and said, Asia, can you take your 90s poem and write a 2000 love poem, right? And so I'm like, oh, that's great. So I wrote it for them and I'm like, this is perfect. I can now tour this at colleges because a lot of you will probably get some of the references from this. So this is the poem that's called Millennium Love, based off of my 90s love poem. I will say that you'll hear me say Nokia in here because, hey, they paid me to do it. All right. So I have to mention them. Product placement. All right. I want to love you like 2000s. I want to love you like sport headbands and long white tees. I want to love you like FUBU jackets and Echo jeans. I want to love you like fitted caps with the tag still showing and be all up in the club when the bows start throwing. Me with a Jersey Shore blowout and super clean white sneaks. You with a tight pink tracksuit with the word princess written in rhinestones across your butt cheeks. And just in case you want to skeet, I'll love you from the windows to the walls to the other side of the room that also has windows. You know what? I don't even know what that means. I want to love you like 2000s, back when love was as reliable as my very first cell cell phone. And for you, I'll spend the 99 cents to download your perfect ringtone. So go ahead and call me over and over again. I want to love you like I love my Nokia 3310, the kind of love you can drop over and over and it'll never crack. I want to love you like that, the kind of love where I don't need games to keep me fulfilled, because unlike smartphones today, my Nokia only had one game you can play. Who needs an angry bird when I can love you like Snake? Easy to learn, but hella hard to master. And the longer our love lasts, getting through it only gets harder, because love ain't supposed to be easy. Girl, please. It's supposed to be as difficult as texting I love you using only the number keys. Like, you gotta press the number 8 3 times just to get a letter V. Love is crazy. Love is insane, yo. Love is creating voicemail greetings to start with a 1-minute slow jam intro. And we both know it sounded amazingly lame, but not as lame as spending hours staring at my computer waiting for you to pop up on AIM. And after the long awaited wait, the first thing I do is to find out if this love is true, is to see if I made it to your MySpace top 8. I want to love you like 2000s. The kind of love as dramatic as primetime TV. I want to love to be awesome. Make you the Joey to my Dawson, the New York to my Flavor Flav, the Jon Stewart to my Stephen Colbert. I want to love you right there through everything, even through all the Grey's Anatomy type of pain. And just when I think all hope is lost, I'll find you right behind me like Rachel to Ross saying, I got off the plane. That was the best line of 2000s, by the way. I want to love you like 2000s. I want to love you like we love saying "what's up" and chillax. I want to love you like Puffy and everyone's videos telling you to take that, take that. Back when love was over the top as Missy Elliott wearing a shiny garbage bag, working it with fluorescent paint on her face. I want to love you the way Nelly loved Band-Aids, the way 182 loved to blink. I want to love you the way people love debating who is better, Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. The answer? Boys to Men. The answer is always Boys to Men. I want to love you like 2000s. I want to love you like the iPod Classic with the click wheel and fill it with the 1000 love songs we learned how to steal. I'm sorry, not steal. They said it was all free. That's why we spent all night on Napster downloading MP3s. Besides, who's really gonna tell? I want to love you like the day my internet got upgraded to DSL, because let's face it, 56K dial-up would always stall, messing up my house phone and disconnecting calls. But like love, I'll find a way to reach you wherever you are. I want to love you the way you love the 6-disc CD changer in the trunk of your car. And since you can't reach it, you better choose the 6 CDs you're willing to listen to with no doubt. Otherwise, you'll have to pull over to the side of the road just to change it out. But like love, we'll stop whatever we're doing just to keep things at its best, because love has always been about progress. Each day an exciting time to discover something new. So I want to love you like 2000s, where every bold step into the future, it's just a step for me to get closer to you. Now take that, take that. All right, guys, we're ready to bring up our very, very first performer. Coming up to the stage, the virtual stage for Kutztown University. First up, let me just get the bio and make sure I got it correct. Our very first performer, Haley Benson, junior psychology major, social diversity committee coordinator for KUAB, and sometimes writes poetry while she is bored. She's the one that introduced me, and now I will be introducing you to her. She will be presenting her poetry tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Haley Benson.
Hello, I wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight to this event. It means a lot to me. And so I have this piece. I don't 100% know, but I would like to call it. I'm going to go with Burning Cigarette. And here it is. My breath smells like regret from the last words that I said. It's 2 a.m, cigarette in my hand glowing red. Lying here on brick and stone, February's always so cold. Pulled the smoke into my lungs and pushed it out just to breathe. My lungs are burning, my stomach's churning, and I've been tossing and turning, feeling sickly and yearning because everything reminds me of you. My heart is shattered, and I am feeling battered. Nothing matters, getting sadder. I crawl into my bed. The last words I said running through my head. If I had only turned around, where would I be right now? Tears streaming down from my eyes, newly salt-stained sheets I'm tucked inside. Crawling under covers just to hide, face glowing red from heat, fighting with you for just a minute. Makes me feel like I've died, and I just want to feel alive. Thank you for listening, and now I'm going to throw it back to Asia.
Thanks, Haley. That was awesome. Like I said, I love listening to poetry when student poetry. I love when you guys get involved and we have a little tiny open mic. We kind of just been chilling, kind of talking, off the chat, like before we got on live tonight. So I'm glad to get to know you guys through the work, and I am glad that you guys are all here. I'm gonna do two more poems for y'all, then we'll bring up our next performer. I kind of want to talk family for this particular set. All right. So on this little mini set right here, there's this new poem that I wrote. Now I will warn you guys that it's fairly new. It's actually one of the poems that I wrote during quarantine. So I never got a chance to really tour it to different colleges. So I'm going to try to do it tonight. If I screw it up, it's all good. I got a backup. I wrote, I have it typed out. So we have a backup, but I will just say that it's one of those things where, we perform poems in front of live audiences. And, I love that because it really battle tests my work. And if I mess up, I can always kind of feed off the vibe of the audience and kind of pick it up where I may have dropped the poem. But when you're doing it virtually, there's nobody here to kind of lift you up when you mess it up. So you're gonna have to kind of do that to yourself. So we're gonna try it, and but you guys will be one of the first few schools to ever hear it. So at least there's that, right? Even if it's screwed up. But I promise, eventually I'll have it locked. So here it is. Ask any member of my family how to prepare a particular dish, and I guarantee you won't get an exact recipe. Case in point, while trying to decipher the scribbles my father gave me on how to make pork adobo, I called him to find out how much vinegar to add to the soy sauce, and he replied, "Oh, enough." Like, what the hell is that supposed to mean? It would take me years to realize that even he didn't know the answer. The recipe was my grandmother's, and she was known for her cooking and not for her clarity. Her answers were always elusive and quick, like her words were fugitives trying to outrun time in the past, was quickly sniffing out her trail. Case in point, once, when her children kept pressing her for the truth about their father's disappearance, without fail, she simply turned over on her deathbed and said, "Okay, that's enough." It's been years since we laid her to rest, but good luck trying to convince my father that during death, the muscles harden because he's still trying to pry the secrets she died clutching between those cooking hands. He continues to stir the pot, searching for his father like a missing page in a cookbook, like there was a picture followed by instructions, but he stopped knowing what to do after a certain point, so he tinkers with the recipe, hell-bent on making his own family look as perfect as that picture, as if nothing will ever taste right until it does. I think the kare-kare needs more sugar. I heard Zasin in Manila. Her sinigang was never this sour. I'm pretty sure there's someone that can track him down. I just want to know what this is missing. I just want to know what happened. Does this taste like hers to you? Do you think he left because of us? Was I not good enough? I asked him if it matters that much. If his truth, our refrigerator doors that once opened will shed a light on his own shortcomings, and he said the truth won't be so easy to digest. But how could he know if he's done his best as a father without a point of reference? So I tell him fatherhood is no different than the recipes he gave me, scribbled and messy. We make of it what we can, throw it against the wall and see what sticks. Because the truth is, between his and my grandmother's cooking, I actually prefer his, because as epic as her dishes were, to me they are just memories now. But yours, dear father, still lingers in my mouth. You've done well with the ingredients you've been given. You've done well with keeping us full. Enough with the careful measures, enough with the chasing of ghosts, enough with the lighting of stoves, trying to hold a flame to your mother's greatness, because even she will tell you that the most flavorful life was always made to taste. She will tell you her recipes were vague because they were never meant to be obeyed. She will tell you we may not look as perfect as that picture, but goddamn, we created something pretty great anyway. But if you still insist, okay, I will confess this. Once, when I was 12 years old, she led me into the kitchen and taught me how to cook her signature sweet fried rice. Taught me how to make it taste exactly like hers. I'm pretty sure she knew I'd teach it to you one day. So I'll show you how to make it. A complete and detailed recipe, a little bit of her that's been left untouched. We both hope it'll fill that void. And we both hope, dear Father, it's enough. So yeah, I wrote that poem because I don't know if your father is the same as mine. I love my father to death, but he's one of those guys that wants everything to be perfect and try to make things perfect, even at the cost of, I don't know, pissing everybody else off. All right. And, you get it. I get it, because, he missed out on a lot as a child, and that's all he wanted growing up, was to have a complete family, one that he didn't get to experience, but I keep trying to tell him that no matter what, it's already good. right? Like when you set expectations of something being good and you're always searching for happiness somewhere else, that is not knowing the happiness is already in front of you, you set yourself up for a lot of disappointment, right? You have to try to believe that what we have already is enough to make us happy. And once we get to that point, then everything else after that, you become better at it, right? Everything, your productivity increases, everything becomes better for your life, your outlook on life, when you already are happy in the present and not constantly searching for something that'll make you happier. So this is the poem. This next one, I'm just gonna tell you a quick story. I tour colleges, right? Right now we're doing everything virtually, but for the most part, I tour colleges and I visit schools, and that's what I've done since 2006. Now, the way my touring works is that whenever you guys are in school, I'm on the road, and whenever you guys are on break, I'm on break. So I loved when you guys were on break, because that means I get to go home, sit at home, do nothing all day except scratch myself, right? I don't like it now because of COVID. Like now it's like, oh, now I wish I'm back on the road. But back in 2012, I would tour, and then I came home, for summertime. And now my wife, she works at the hospital. She works every day, 12 hours every day, goes to work at 10 a.m., comes home at 10 at night, right? And so when you've been with somebody for as long as she and I have been together, you get so used to being each other that when one of you is gone, the other person kind of loses their bearings, right? Now, when we're both working, then it's all good. Like when she's at work and I'm touring, all good. We don't, we think of each other, but we're so busy that we're not sulking alone, right? But whenever she's home and I'm on the road, then she gets a little bit sad being at home, it's so empty here. Well, summer 2012, I was home, and I've been stuck at home 12 hours every day. And, you would lose your mind staying at home 12 hours every day, not having anything to do. That by the time she would get off of work, she'll come into the house and the whole house is still a mess. I've been sitting on the couch playing video games or watching TV for like 12 hours now. And she'd look at me, she's like, "Are you still wearing the same clothes that you were wearing when I left for work?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I didn't have to go anywhere." And then she'd be like, "You know what? I can't handle it when you're here too long." I'm like, "Well, damn." She's like, "No, I'm just saying, I think that you're starting to lose, you're starting to go cabin crazy. Why don't you go on vacation?" I'm like, "Well, where am I going to go by myself?" She's like, "I don't know. Go to California, go visit your mom, brother and sisters." So summer 2012, I flew to California, and basically this is all I did all day. I would sit at home at my mom's house and wait for my sister to come home from work, which was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My sister would come home. She would sit down next to me. We'll open our laptops and not say a single word to each other for like 4 hours, right? Like, if you've ever been that close with somebody that you don't even need to talk. Like, we just love being around each other so much. It didn't matter if we had anything to say. We just love being in each other's presence. Now, don't get me wrong, when me and my siblings are goofing around, with the most hilarious group of people you'll ever meet, but there were times when, we just stopped being in each other's presence without having to say or do anything. Well, on the last day that I was supposed to fly back to Florida, my sister came home from work really early, like I think 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. And when she came home, I'm like, "Well, what are you doing here? It's still early." And she's like, "Well, I've had this headache and it hasn't gone away in like 3 days. And today I just couldn't take it anymore." Now, mind you, my sister never calls out of work. She's one of those people that no matter what, she will always find a way to make it in, because that's just how her work ethic was, right? And the thing is, she would never really get sick, right? She never needed to call in because she never got sick. Like, she was fully healthy, nothing wrong with her. I mean, maybe except for her liver, because apparently her and Hennessy have a very important relationship, right? In every family, there's always that one person whose job it is to get everybody drunk. Like, that's my sister. Right? Like, she'll give out shots to my grandma. And I'm like, "Kate, you realize she's like 89. And my sister will be like, "Well, she needs to man up." And the funny thing is, my grandma will outdrink all of us. I'm like, "You forget, she came from the poorest parts of the Philippines where they couldn't afford liquor. So they would mix rubbing alcohol with Sprite." Like, she was just gangster like that. So anyway, so for my sister to come home, my mom, with a headache, my mom was like bugging out, right? She's like, "Oh, you need to go to the ER. You need to go have it checked." And my sister was like, "It's fine. It's just a headache. It'll go away. I get these all the time." And I looked at her, I'm like, "Well, you better go, because mom's going to continue to bother you until you do." So they go to the ER. I stayed home, finished packing to fly back to Florida. A couple hours later, I get a text message from my sister, and she's like, "Yeah, so it looks like they found a tumor in my brain." I'm like, "Crap." So I called the airline, canceled my flight, went to the ER to check up on her. When I got there, she was like, "Oh, good news. The tumor isn't cancerous. Looks like I've had it since I was 19. It's actually in between the two halves of the brain on the surface. And the doctor says all they got to do is cut a hole, take it out, and they should be out of there within a couple of weeks." The only downside is they're gonna have to put a metal plate in my head, but I think that's okay because I'll probably get better cell phone signal. Like that's just how we made jokes, right? On my house, like we just make jokes like that. So knowing that she was gonna be fine, I flew back to Florida that Friday. That Monday she went into surgery. That Tuesday I called up her fiance. I'm like, hey, how's my sister doing? He's like, oh, she's good. She woke up. She recognized all of us. She even called your brother ugly, so we know her brain's still intact. The only thing is she couldn't move some of her extremities, and the doctor said that's probably because of the anesthesia. But as soon as the anesthesia wears off, she should be good to go. So I hung up the phone. That Thursday, I get a frantic phone call from my mom. And she's like, you need to come home. Somewhere in the middle of the night, a blood vessel hemorrhage in her brain. They couldn't stop the bleeding, and they rushed her back to the ICU and put her into an induced coma. We don't know what's going to happen. Just get back here as soon as possible. So I flew back to California that Friday. By that Sunday, the doctors had pronounced her brain dead. By that Monday, we had to pull the plug. And by that following Saturday, I was burying my sister. And I bring this up to y'all now because, like I said in the beginning, right now you're students. And, if you're not busy now, you're going to get busier. And the busier and busier we get, the less and less time we have for the people that we love. So when we have that time, don't ever let a moment go by to you. Don't let somebody know just how much they mean to you. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes we are so worried about what we have to do later or what we had to do earlier that we forget to be in the moment that we're in. And right now, this is the moment that we're in, virtually as it is. This is the moment that we're all sharing together. And within this hour and a half or so, we get to share lives for that time. And you may never see me in person. We may never meet, right? But we still are sharing a moment together. So be there, be present, right? Everything else will take care of itself. If there's any kind of advice I can give you from somebody who's been out of college for many years now and have had multiple careers, it's not that important. I mean, it is. It's your education. But take the time to be present and be there for yourself. That is the most important thing. Your wellness is the most important thing. When you live in a life that's too stressful, things fall apart, man. And you look back and like, where did all those years go? So I'm gonna do this poem. This is the poem that I wrote for my sister. It is without a doubt one of the hardest poems I've had to write, but I do hope that you can get something out of it. And it's called Awakening, and here it is. When the snow falls in the winter, the woolly caterpillar crawls into a crevice and freezes to death. Its blood stops flowing, its lungs harness into ice, its heart comes slowly to a halt. The heart is always the last to go. But when the snow melts in the spring, the ice thaws from its ventricles, the crystals dissolves from its lungs, and just as slowly as it died, the woolly caterpillar awakens and comes back to life. For 120 hours, we waited for my sister to wake up. My family mumbling prayers around the doctor who tells us she fell into a coma when a blood vessel hemorrhaged, and my father hasn't stopped praying since. My stepfather searching the eyes of doctors for the answers to those prayers. My siblings pushing me into the room as though I could perform a miracle. My mother making twin towers of my arms the way she crashed into them now, while I attempted to believe that my faith far exceeds science and God would awaken her somehow. Awaken, sweet sister. Tell me that my tears, the size of mustard seeds, will fall upon your cheek and move the mountain of swelling in your brain. Tell me that the same God who makes all things possible can still live up to his name, because right now that name belongs to your mother, who's cursing God for being too coward to make up his own mind as she stares at the medical forms granting the hospital permission to let you die. If they want her, then take her, she says. Who am I to decide? And by her side is your fiancé, whose fists are stones he's ready to throw. If the doctor mentions organ donation just one more time, but your father, he sits still praying at your bedside, wrapping rosaries around your hands and tucking prayer cards behind your neck. God will resurrect my daughter, he says. Please, God, tell me she'll resurrect. How do I respond? How do I agree when the tubes of your IV intertwines around my throat, strangles my voice every time I plead, awaken, sweet sister? Make this poem easier to write. Tonight, pull out the respirator in your throat and speak the words that will end this poem brighter than how it begun. Remove the tubes and we'll blow kisses into your veins that you may know where the true source of your life comes from, how it comes from your heart, how in this hurricane world, you broke into tiny pieces, dropped them like care packages on our laps. You always had enough of it to give, which is why there are 200 people in the waiting room now, ready to give it back in case you need it to live, but on the seventh day, The doctor gave us the results of the last test my sister will ever take, and I swear I'm not built for earthquakes like that. My knees buckling like a bridge, my arms shaking too much to catch another one of my mother's crash landings. None of us was left standing. We were all falling through the cracks, falling until we hit the floor for room that night. This is what rock bottom must look like. The nurse disconnecting her machines, our hands stretching to touch a part of her as we wailed, our tears dropping as fast as her heartbeat, our sanity vanishing with her breath. Faster it faded. My stepfather stroking her face. Faster it faded. My father presses her hand to his cheek. Faster it faded. We're still waiting on a miracle. Faster it faded. My face planted to my mother's belly. Mommy, this hurts. Faster it faded, and then it was finished. The monitors dropped to zero, and as her breath emptied and her heartbeat slowed, her fiance removes the ring from her finger, ties it to his necklace, and says how fitting. It was her heart that was the last to go. It was silent after that, silent as my mother reaches over to close her daughter's eyes. My stepfather releases his long-awaited sigh. My sibling straightens the creases in her blanket while my father unravels the rosary from her hands, takes a pair of cards from behind her neck and sips them into his pocket, places a kiss on her forehead, her chest, and both her shoulders. Put in a good word to God for us, he says. And that's when I knew that all along we had failed to see the light at the end of this tunnel she was going through. Because while we were praying for her awakening, the awakening was really meant for us, to remind us that life is a coma we can still choose to wake up from. The faith means not having to wait for the sun to come, because sometimes the sun doesn't come, but we can still rise on our own. Her last breath has already blown life into the candles of our bones, with nothing more but a wish that we may live more fully. The woolly caterpillar freezes to death in the winter and comes back to life in the spring. For 14 years, it goes through the same cycle of awakening, waiting until the final year when its work is complete, then spins itself into a cocoon to be reborn a moth and fly away for good. So sleep now, sweet sister. You surrendered your life for too many winters. We'll take it from here. Sleep now wherever you wake. May you be reborn with wings on your back, fly into the sun, knowing when our own winter ends, spring will come and we'll see each other again. But until then, yeah, put in a good word to God for us. All right, guys. I'm about to bring up our next poet. Before I do, let's get some haikus. These are my COVID-inspired haikus. You ready? 2020. You are like my ex-girlfriend. Exciting, but crazy. I wear masks. No, not the kind that stops viruses. I'm robbing a bank. If COVID teaches us anything, it's how to use unfriend button. All right, guys, our next performer is also coming from your school, Eleanor Trigoni. Eleanor Trigoni is an art education major, trans woman, and hip hop head. Tonight, Eleanor is going to do some poetry and spoken word for y'all. Please give a wonderful, big, virtual round of applause to Eleanor Trigoni.
Hello. I'm going to do 2 poems for y'all. Yeah, so I'm just going to just jump right into it, I guess. This first one is called Stalwart. I actually wrote it like the other day, so hopefully you'll like it. It goes like a hardened shell, worn and weathered, cracked by the depths of grief, a great wreck atop the ancient reef. Fish like thieves hop in scurvy, often worried but locked in turn in tandem, wordless ramblings that work the lettered and wave-sanded planks. A stake that saps the strength. And like squirming tendrils, the joy escapes. The soul quakes and sputters, shaking, covered from head to toe in lovely colors, shooting roots like heavenly bows to tie the sky in knots of flame. A single bite on gunmetal, the sun-setting act. A plight of might and magic, despite this act of mine, the signs were all but tragic, a joy of life, defined by poison promise, destroyed by noise and boyish action, coyly brandished by voices poignant, lacking choice and bastion, it fell to me. An elder king. Of older days and better things, quelled by helter-skelter, the scepter felt like held to free, but seldom seen as self-estranged and sentiency as performative. The sort of sore, sure-footed torture that has formed my moods, a score to prove, that ignoring forces is a chore to do, that the worst of ordeals are but shores in the lakes of truth, a basic rule. All flakes are shaved from the same taste and root, all changes break from a place of stranger days and news. So what say you? When greatness fails to make it, when aching hearts won't face it, would faith will stave the angst and stave us off in the wastes that cave the ancient? A blanket, a sacred statement. It wasn't wasted on the taste of latent fragrance. Instead, the days we claim as saved were made to praise the basic. Away with words as I lay in bed. The pace of death seems to creep away while days will play and stay in heads alight with prize and action. A fine life to fry in vats of crying acid. The price of laughing at giants is violent crashing. Vibrant lashings that tie the sky in lines of titan ashes. Spite a knife to split the vines and drop your bastion. Falling, smashing, stalwart mashing of teeth that claw like awesome wrath of dogged actions. The clocks, walking faster as walking faster as longer days fall the quicker actions. We wistful lack the business to kick and bite, wistful plight to fight the power of aging days, afraid that the names will fade like failing faithful storage of places and locker combinations felled in the marching place of life and changing situations. And the second one is I guess just kind of like a piece on like anxiety and gender identity, which is a little relevant to me. It's called The Strength of Claims. It was first spoken from a perch, a term discerned by those with courage, words with weight and meaning that set you reeling, acceptance of feeling left for those with steely nerves. But what really hurts is that they've stuck with you, like a pin, destiny and reeling sticking to your skin, a perfect fit. A match for your half left concealed, while emotions left buried leapt from the tongues of strangers, shocked by the sudden rays of light like a knife to throat. You've always thought these thoughts an awful lot, ingrained away with the same frame of mind to push afraid twice before in the past they've come to crash a route. But fear is great, and a delay. The run to shade is the way to remain unfazed, unburned, unscathed, consumed, not you. The strength of claims enough to break your brain, under the weight and strain, afraid to relay these mighty terms, struck with an almighty curse to deny your worth or happiness. It feels like half of this life is out of reach, denied to the right of peace by a sign at birth. Biology's purred forth to try to force you to resign to a life and work just to find your hurt. But you didn't search. In fact, you ran, and as the span of time cleared the field, it clawed advancing until it found you all the same. A surprise attack. Your mind was racked, so bit by bit it filled the niche, scratched the itch. Acceptance as a lethal weapon, deceit it seemed, doubt to keep you from second guessing. But it felt so real, so right. The light from night spent in its research, peeling through the sources of force and might that contorts you from what you're sure to find is a course of life. Sitting open-headed, drafty addict from the ghost we let in, I'd rather languish. In fact, the statement detains the angle I've made to tackle. It's my own experience. How hard is it to pick the fruit from limb and go to market? Apple pale upturned, cake in mud. The air is fat with the singing of birds and blooming of flesh. The sun is soon to set. A single fruit bruised from too much pressure marks a spoiled bunch. I'm losing my lunch. A young tree, plentiful and weighed heavy with gifts to bear, sits atop its plot of rotting flesh, set apart by the orchard by a wayward seed, made to watch its kin display their glee as children run amongst their leaves and pluck their labor and let them breathe. Except not me. Because despite the interest, despite the effort, despite the effervescent desire to leap from my skin and wholeheartedly Despite the effervescent desire to leap from skin and wholeheartedly rush headlong into that new beginning, I stand firm, tall, stoic in my anguish, an elk, hopelessly barren, spoken to rarely but by choice. Any voice may disrupt the groaning of growing, the knowing and hoping, the knowledge and probing deep into the facets of my mind, a vain attempt to find that source and explain, to gain permission in suffering, to join that world and leave my plot. I need these thoughts. And with that, I'll toss it back over to Asia.
Eleanor, thank you so much. Thank you guys again for sharing. We have one more performer, but I don't know if Rachel is here yet. So what I will do is I'm going to do a couple more poems, double check to see if our third performer has arrived. And then if not, then I will just go ahead and close out the show. I hope you guys are having a good time so far. I hope you've been enjoying the students' poetry, as I hope you're enjoying yourselves. And yeah, so haikus. Love is about trust. Want to test it? Don't clear your browser history. Listen, guys, all right? You need to have somebody in your life that's hardcore enough to do what needs to be done in the event of your demise, right? Like I have very close friends who, if something were to happen to me, they will be like, all right, Operation Wipeout. And they'll know exactly what to do with all of my devices because I don't need stuff to pop up, right, after I'm gone. When you love someone, love even their sickness. My wife's sickness is Target. Like for real, it's so funny. The other day we were at Target and I had to have a pep talk with my wife, like before we stepped into the store. Like, what are we getting? All right, we're just getting this, this, and this, and that's it, right? Like, and I'm confirming. I'm like, because once we go in there, we're just getting paper towels, we're getting bananas, and we are getting shampoo, and that's it. And we're going home. And then she had the nerve to just look at me and be like, I mean, I don't know. I'm like, no, you can't do this. I don't know. You can't call an audible. I would write haikus about your endless beauty, but don't have enough. So this poem, the poem earlier, Awakening, was one of the hardest poems I've had to write. This upcoming poem now is also another poem that was extremely hard to write. This is a poem for my wife. In my first poem, I did mention that we now have a child, but getting to that point was not easy. We with me having testicular cancer, there was a big chance that we were probably never going to have children. But 2 years after my cancer was diagnosed and I beat it. 2 years after my cancer, my wife did manage to get pregnant. So we got super excited. Now, my sister, who I just did the poem for, she's one of those, like, she wanted us to have kids more than we wanted to have kids. It was creepy. Like, we would go to California to visit and she would like shove us into the guest room and be like, don't come out till you've conceived. I'm like, hello, that's creepy, right? But so when she found out that we got pregnant, she was like super excited. She was like, oh my God, you have to name your kid after a hotel in Vegas, because she loves Vegas. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not going to name my kid Bellagio. Okay. She's like, no, there's some cool ones, like Caesar, Arya. And I'm like, oh yeah, Arya, Game of Thrones. That actually be a cool name, right? So we were pregnant, and 2 months into our pregnancy, we were driving home from a holiday party. My wife was like, can you hurry up home? I'm like, I really need to use the bathroom. So we get home and she goes into the bathroom, and this is kind of where the poem picks up from. I won't really go into much detail about it. We can talk about it a little bit afterwards, but this is the poem, and it's called Bathtub. The shower has been running for over an hour. When I find her, she is sitting cross-legged at the far end of the bathtub, and without looking up, she says, the blood has finally slowed down. These were the first words she's spoken since the hospital. I'm sure she's been waiting to speak until now, at least here, with the water streaming down her face. There's no way for me to tell if she's been crying. She says, remind me tomorrow to cancel the baby registry. What am I supposed to say? I'm supposed to be good with words, but right now there's a bright pink river snaking its way towards the drain, and I can't get my tongue to paddle us upstream back into her womb where we left our happiness yesterday. I read the story of a 12-year-old boy locked for 2 years in the bathroom, the light switch covered with duct tape to keep him from turning on the lights. When they found him, he was too weak to climb out of the bathtub on his own. Before that, I read the story of a 3-year-old child hung upside down and beaten with a frying pan, then left to die on the floor while his parents screwed on the air mattress next to him. Before that, I read the story of a 6-year-old girl who felt the only way to overcome the bullying was to hang herself with a jump rope. A jump rope. At what point did she feel so ignored? She felt the only way to be heard was to turn that jump rope into a cord, tie that cord around her voice, anchor it to the heavens, and play telephone with God. Sweet, sweet girl, if only my wife would have heard you. She would have answered that call. She would have shown you how to use that jump rope properly. It's why I don't tell her these stories of these children born into monsters and afraid to sleep in the dark, because it would only remind her there's a nightlight we bought for the nursery that will never be used. It's even one of those nightlights that light up the ceiling with tiny stars. That night, we slept in each other's arms, our bodies entwined into a figure eight of infinity, because that's how loud we dialed up the silence. And the only words of comfort I could muster was to tell her we'll just be the best aunt and uncle to everyone else's kids. Like this was some sort of consolation prize. Sometimes the math just doesn't add up. On one side is a child wanting nothing more than a safe place to sleep. On the other, our parents staring at a crib they will never get to assemble. My God, can you not see this? Can you not do something to close the distance? Or at least tell me what to say to my wife to lift her up? When an empty womb feels so heavy, all she can do is collapse in the corner of our bathtub that Sunday. As I sat in church with my arms crossed, I glanced over to find her on her knees, her surrender telling me that sometimes the only way up is to hit the ground. The whispered prayers will reach heaven further than my screams. And for 2 years she did this, not once getting loud, stacked each prayer on top of the other until it was high enough to pierce the clouds. And finally he answered, his cross appearing in the window of that positive pregnancy test. And now I am bent over the same bathtub I found her years before, giving our 2-year-old son a bath. He splashes water on the floor, laughs when I get angry, and when we finish, when I tell him to put his bath toys away, he kisses each one just before he drops it into the basket. He knows how to love because he is loved. He knows how to love because he is loved. I pray every child could be as lucky. Despite stereotype, not all Asians are good at math. That's why this haiku has 27 syllables. You think I need pills because I can't sit still. Maybe you're just boring. I actually wrote that for my son when he was in pre-K. I love the teachers he has now. He has an amazing school that he goes to, great teachers. But prior to going to this school, he was in pre-K, and he was like very busy, right? And so the teacher was like saying to us, maybe you guys should go get him checked out. Maybe there's like a pill or something. I'm like, are you kidding me? The kid is like 4 years old. Like, what are you talking? Anyway. I asked my son what he wanted to be when he grows up. He said, happy. So, life is not without its challenges, right? I mean, first cancer and then miscarriages. And then we finally was able to have a kid. But even then, the challenges didn't stop. Just a quick note, my son was born with something called neurofibromatosis. It's a genetic condition. For the most part, there's nothing wrong. Nothing happens with him. They just knew he had the condition because he had a whole bunch of cafe au lait spots all over his body. Normally, that's as far as that goes. It does cause some hearing, some physical delays. It causes some learning delays. A few things. So like, for example, he couldn't walk until he was like 17 months. He couldn't jump until he was like 3 years old. He didn't start talking until he was like 2.5, 3 years old. So there was a lot of delays. We did our best though to get him to where he's at now, where we made sure that he stayed somewhat ahead. And so he's doing great. One of the things they say about NF though is that in very, very rare instances, he can start to grow a lot of tumors. And if you've ever seen any pictures of people that looks like their face is melting, those are people who may have NF, right? Where there's so many tumors that grow that the skin starts to sag. So every year we have to have it checked to see if any tumors are growing. And so far, prayerfully, thankfully, none of that has happened. But I wanted to write a poem for him ever since he was born. I wanted to write this poem, father and son type of poem, but I didn't want to just write a poem that was cliche. I didn't just want to write this father loves son cliche type poem. I wanted to make sure that it meant something. And so as artists, sometimes you got to leave ideas alone until the ideas come to you. So since I couldn't get any really good ideas on what poem I wanted to write, I kind of just left it alone. And then last year, when he started first grade, I was changing him for his first day of school. And I remember seeing all the spots on his body. And I'm like, oh, I didn't want him to be made fun of, right? I mean, they're not really noticeable or anything, but for some reason, I was self-conscious for him. And so I put a hoodie on him because it was hot outside. It was like, August, end of August here in Florida. So it was like, 90 degrees or whatever. And he's like, Daddy, it's hot. I want to wear a hoodie. And I'm like, I was trying to show him like, no, but you need to wear this because, I'm trying to hide. I couldn't tell him why I was doing it. I was trying to hide the spots. And then it dawned on me that I'm like, what am I doing? I'm already setting up my kid to be ashamed. And I was like, wow, shame on me, right? And so I let him go to school, and I realized at that moment what the poem should be about. A lot of us here, we all have something about us that we don't like. There's a lot of things that we want to hide from the rest of the world because we're ashamed of it. And as children, we're not usually ashamed of stuff like that. It's not until we get into our teens that we start to get self-conscious about stuff. And my son, he didn't care. It didn't matter to him that he had like these cafe au lait spots all over his body, but I did. And so I had to really correct myself in that moment to like, what? No. So this is the poem that I wrote. It's dedicated to him, but really it's all dedicated to all of us who have something to hide, to remind you that we are all made to be who who we are. And don't hide all that stuff, right? You are made to be unique. We are not made to be perfect. We are not made to all be flawless, because there is no such thing. What makes us unique and what makes us have character is the fact that we are all different in many ways, and we are all unique in our own ways. So this is the poem, and it's called Walking Constellation. Every year, there are roughly 130 million babies and 150 billion stars born in the entire known universe. In a span of 9 years, my wife and I had 3 known miscarriages. All that to say, we spent a lot of time floating in the empty void of space, wondering why the numbers never stacked in our favor. When we finally caught the comet, the geneticist saw the 100 tiny birthmarks that freckled my son's entire body and told us this was a symptom of neurofibromatosis, a rare genetic condition that can cause benign tumors to grow in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. At its worst, so many tumors can grow, we can sag his skin and make his face look like it's melting. And I'm wondering, how will I handle the tumors if they come? If I can't even stand to look at the birthmarks that are already there, fast forward 4 years. It's his first day of school and he's throwing a tantrum because I'm making him wear a hoodie in this 90-degree weather, but I can't tell him I'm trying to hide the spots. It's just, I know too well people's tendency to be cruel, how they like to chop down trees just to make more handles to mount their axe, and I won't let him get whittled down by sharp tongues like that, watching them take from him and turn him into something that he's not until he slowly becomes the weapon that's turning on himself. I know too well that kind of self-hate, and right now I'm just doing my best to control the fate of what's meant to become of my son. So please just put this hoodie on, because you can't yet see your birthmarks for what they truly are. But just then, while standing there naked, he held up his arms and said, "Daddy, they look like stars." Then pointing to the biggest one on his ribs, he said, "Daddy, this one looks like a spaceship. So forgive me for failing to compose myself when he started making up stories of the spaceship flying through the galaxy that is his body. Have I forgotten how much energy it takes to create a planet? Have I forgotten about the black hole that can suck the life out of an empty womb? Have I forgotten about the empty space that was left behind after the first time I dismantled the unused crib in our bedroom? How dare me think I know more about this universe than you do? How dare me forget all the stars that fizzled out before you came shining through? You were born, you are here, riddled with spots as proof you exist. It's why they call them birthmarks to begin with. So how lucky are we that you have more than most? Miracle boy, I know one day you might want to eclipse yourself into that hoodie to hide behind the moon as they stare and point. Well, let them stare and point the same way they stare and point at stars in wonder and awe. Remind them they're merely specks of dust in the vastness of your presence. And when the bullies come with their meteor shower of insults aiming to hit you at your core, swing your Milky Way arm to the bridge of their nose, so they will always know that you are the big bang your mother and I have been waiting for. You walking constellation, you light-speed traveler, you rocket of hope. I've gone on with this metaphor for too long, I know, but every year there are roughly 130 million babies and 150 billion stars born in the entire known universe. All that to say, no matter how worse your condition becomes, we will always love you until infinity. You are our son, our 1 in 150 billion. All right, guys. So I think we're almost near to the end. I got one last poem for y'all to be, which is really awesome. But let's see if our last performer has showed up. I don't see Rachel. Okay. So we had one more performer, but it looks like they are not here. I do want to, I'll do one more poem to close out the night. I do want to say thank you guys for joining us and for being here. I miss being out on the road. I really do. I really, really do. I miss being in front of all of you. And I hope that 2021 will bring us better things. They always say it gets worse before it gets better. I hope 2021 is not worse. Lord knows we've all had our share this year, y'all. Like, it's a lot of us are just over with it already. But thank God that we've all found resilience. Thank God we've all found a way to make it work no matter what. Before I go, I do ask you guys to just visit me online. You can visit my website, theasiaproject.com. That's the Asia Project, not the Asian Project. TheAsianProject.com is a website that sells bowls and noodles. I'm not kidding you. That's not me. I don't want you to get on there and be like, oh, that's a hustle. No, that's not. theasiaproject.com. From there, it'll lead you to our online store. We sell, merch, like we have shirts and stickers and badges and all that cool stuff. It'll also lead you to links to where you can stream our music. For poetry, I usually perform with my brother-in-law who does music with my poetry. So you can check us out on Spotify, Amazon. You can check us out on iTunes. We're all over the place. So just come and peep that. Other than that, come message me. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. I'm more on Facebook and Twitter, Facebook and Instagram more than Twitter. Right. So Instagram, I'm there a lot. So please come and follow it. Also, I've started doing a vlog on YouTube. So for all of you who love to write or even just want to know about poetry and my life in general, I have a vlog up there that gives you like travel tips and writing tips and, workshops, things like that. So come visit and come check it out. That being said, I'm just going to go ahead and close out with this one last poem. This poem is also new. This is actually the newest poem that I have. That was also written during quarantine. And I wrote this because, I've been doing poetry now for years. I started doing spoken word poetry in 2002. That's 18 years. I've been doing it professionally since 2006. So that's been 14 years. And when I first started and I got on HBO and I got on all these big things, I thought I was going to skyrocket to this fame. And I wanted this fame. I wanted this notoriety. I wanted to get on Instagram and have 1 million subscribers, followers and things like that. I had my eye on this thing, right? And, if there was anything that cancer, miscarriages, my son's condition, all the stuff that I've already had to go through, my sister dying, if there's anything that teaches, all that stuff will teach you, is that all that other stuff that you think you want, it's just temporary. Like I said already before, happiness is already here, right? We have everything. A couple of weeks ago, we were hit with Hurricane Sally. I don't live in South Florida anymore. I live on the Gulf Coast now. And we were hit with Hurricane Sally. My deck collapsed over there. My garage flooded over there. But we were safe. We left the house, we evacuated, and we were fine. And thank God that the house wasn't damaged. But I started to realize as I was throwing away a lot of the stuff in the garage, it flooded. And so I had to throw away a lot of all the stuff. And I'm like, I never even knew I had this. And I didn't even care about it, it just was there. And I'm like, oh, get rid of it, right? And I realized that all that stuff that you think you want, it's not really that important. What's important is the fact that you have people that love you. It's important to me that I spent that time with my family, that we were safe, right? And I'm starting to realize what legacy really means. And legacy is, how did you live your life, right? Not in the eyes of everyone else, but how did you live your life for you? What kind of morals did you hold on to? What kind of beliefs did you hold on to? What kind of conviction did you hold on to, right? Did you do the things that would hopefully change the world, or even just change the people's lives around you? You don't have to go out there and be a savior to everyone. You just have to be a savior to the ones who love you, right? And that's really what's important, is cherishing the things that matter. So this poem, I feel, they asked Andy Warhol one time, they said, what's the favorite painting you've ever painted? And his answer always was, my next one. So whenever people always ask me, what's your favorite poem of yours? And I always say the next one. So because this is my newest poem for right now, this is the one that I'm holding dear. Again, might screw it up a little bit because it is new. It's 1 month new, that's how new this is. So I hope you guys like it. And I'm gonna close out with this. But before I do, I'm gonna close out with my last 3 haikus. If you didn't laugh at any of my other haikus, then I don't know what to tell you. These are my favorite ones now. So if you don't even laugh at these, then you know what? I don't know what to tell you. Sorry. But I believe there's no such things as dogs, said a dyslexic atheist. I'm going to repeat that. I believe there's no such things as dogs, said the dyslexic atheist. That was deep, super deep. Practice safe sex. Use protection, like a helmet. Hashtag headboards hurt. And finally, I'm going to give you this haiku for you to remember. I wrote this when I was going through a very hard time. And I think that if you try to remember this haiku, then when you go through a hard time yourself, you can remember this haiku and repeat it to yourself. So remember, if you're going through a hard time, like I went through, this was a very brief moment. I was going through a very hard time and I decided to write this haiku. Push through the pain, no matter how hard, victory will be yours. Pooping. After my sister died, my siblings and I had this morbid joke about what we would want written on our tombstones. I told them I wanted mine to say, "Thank you for visiting. Now please stop standing on my nuts." Not once, between the sick laughter in our teeth, did it occur to any of us. We don't write our own tombstones. If the thought of that doesn't scare you, then clearly you haven't thought about the jury responsible for yours, our lovers, our family and friends, or God forbid, our children, because those fuckers have more evidence to judge us than anyone, and you're saying that doesn't scare you to death? You don't turn ghost at the thought that there are people out there who could see right through you. Relax. No one is paying good money to the chisel to remind us you were kind of a dick. Even killers are buried in forgotten and unmarked graves. I am not afraid to be forgotten. I am more afraid my grave will be a monument to a man I never actually became. This embellished lie planted above my casket, forever to hang over my head. But had you asked me back then, I would have said, carve me legend. Carve me saddle on my high horse. Carve all my accolades around the base. Might want to spring for the entire mausoleum to make it all fit, if you know what I'm saying. But I've since racked up too much mileage on this tongue from all the years spent running my mouth, and I've since found out that the choir that sings your praises can quickly become the choir that will tear down your pulpit just for the materials to build your cross. I know I'm no Jesus. Most times, it's my own God complex that has even my loved ones staring me down with a handful of nails. I'm pretty sure they can't wait to hammer into my ankles if it'll keep me from constantly putting my foot in my mouth. But if I could just manage to mortician the ego out, then maybe my open casket won't look so grotesque. We all want to put our best face forward. It's just most times, my best face forward has me turning my back to those responsible for collecting my bones. There's a reason resumes are not carved on tombstones. There's a reason my son can't quote a lick of any of my poems, but word for word, recite every one of my bedtime stories that has made him laugh. I remind myself that to water where the grass grows, because the worst blow anyone could deliver to a writer like me is a tombstone with something so cliche like loving husband and father, just to take up the space of having nothing else better to say. Nothing is worse than being forgotten, than being remembered, than unforgiven. It's why this poem is now in its 50th revision, rewriting and rewriting until I have a story where I don't end up the bad guy, because sometimes the bad guys are the ones with the worst intentions, but became too obsessed trying to control what their tombstone will say. I don't ever want to win this life like that. I want to be one of the good guys to finish last. I want to be so far back on my final lap that by the time I cross the finish line, the balloons are gone. The music has stopped. The crowd is dispersed. And the only ones left to cheer me on are those that taught me compassion, taught me decency, taught me humility, and just maybe I'll make them proud enough to tell the chisel, to tell the tombstone, he was a good man. Yeah, that's it. As simple as that might be, I just really hope my tombstone says he was a good man. Now please stop standing on his nuts. Kutztown, thank you guys so much for having us. Thank you for inviting us into your home, into your virtual spaces, and I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves tonight. Don't forget to follow us, and message me if you want. I'll say what's up. But again, I want to thank you guys for staying and being here with us tonight. And may you guys, I'll see, hopefully, COVID will be done. Well, not done, but hopefully COVID will be under control soon enough that I can actually do in-person shows with y'all. Thank you guys. God bless. Good night.
Hello again.
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for coming on tonight. Thank you to Asia for hosting and Eleanor who performed with me tonight. KUEB does have a virtual comedy night event next week for homecoming on Tuesday, October 20th at 7 p.m. So please come out and watch comedians Gibran Salim and